before the world was shaped by kings, before laws etched stone and crowns claimed heaven's favor, there lived a man who saw too far. He was not a ruler, not a warrior, not a god. He was a prophet, with eyes that could see the shape of centuries. He spoke of bridges that hung in the sky, of towers made of glass, of men who flew without wings, and fire that answered to a whisper. The people listened, the priests trembled, and the rulers, they called it blasphemy. So they gave him two choices, silence or ash. He chose the fire, and with it, he burned a scroll known only as the map to the future. Some say it was myth, others say it was the blueprint of a world not yet born. This is the forgotten tale of the man who saw too far, and chose to blind the world, to save it. It was said the scroll was made from papyrus grown on cursed soil, inked not with dye, but with crushed gemstones and powdered bone. It had no title, no beginning, just visions, flowing like breath on cold glass. Those who read it wept, not out of fear, but out of awe. It spoke of a time when men would build stars inside metal jars, where animals no longer lived in forests, but on screens, where war was not fought by swords, but by invisible waves in the air. To the wise it was prophecy, to the powerful it was threat, and at the center of it all, a nameless prophet, wrapped in robes stitched with ash and wire. He carried no blade, only words. He wandered from temple to temple, city to city, showing the scroll only to those who asked with sincerity. But power does not tolerate truth, especially when it is not convenient, and so they began to hunt him. They said his eyes glowed, not with light, but with knowing. When he looked at you, you felt seen not as you were, but as you might become. A farmer once claimed. He looked at me and saw me planting stars instead of seeds. A child whispered. He told me I would grow into someone the world forgot to invent. No name, no origin, only a title whispered in frightened corners. The seer of tomorrows. He did not ask for followers, yet people followed. He gave no commands, yet armies of hearts began to march behind his shadow. He said little, but when he spoke, it was like thunder in the bones. In the scroll's symbols were visions of glass cities, of voices stored in jars, of time bent like branches. And to the rulers of the age, it was heresy, because prophecy that speaks of a world without kings is prophecy that must be silenced. The high clerics gathered in secret. The emperor's spies spread lies. He curses crops. He poisons children. He steals futures. But no one could kill a man who walked behind time. So they made a decision far crueler than death. They would destroy not the prophet, but the scroll. It was morning when the soldiers came. But the wind, which had always carried the prophet's voice farther than sound should travel, was gone. No breeze stirred the trees. No birds flew overhead. The world held its breath. And in the center of that stillness, beneath a crumbling sun temple in the Valley of Oaths, the prophet stood, scroll in hand, as 13 soldiers in gold approached him with drawn blades. They did not speak, neither did he. Instead, he laid the scroll gently on a slab of stone, as though placing a sleeping child to rest. One soldier stepped forward, a torch in hand, but his hand trembled, because even the cruel knew, this was no ordinary parchment. This was the blueprint of a world unborn. Why do you fear a map? The prophet asked softly. Because it shows you a road you did not build? Another soldier whispered, my daughter dreams of these cities. I've never told her the stories. How can she see what she's never known? But duty is heavier than wonder. The torch dropped. The scroll did not burn like paper. It hissed. It howled. It cracked the air like lightning without storm. And in that moment, the clouds shifted violently, winds returned in a scream, and the earth seemed to mourn. The prophet turned his back, robe whipping in the sudden gale. You have burned the map, he said, but the road is still waiting. After the fire, only ashes remained, and silence. The scroll was gone, its symbols devoured, its secrets scattered to the wind like forgotten prayers. The soldiers left without a word. Their boots left no prints in the dust. And the prophet, he did not run. He simply sat among the ashes, his hands dark with soot, his eyes closed, not in grief, but in meditation. For 7 days he did not eat. For 7 nights he did not sleep. People came. They brought him food, water, shelter. But he refused them all. Instead, he whispered to the wind, as if the ashes could still listen. A young boy approached him once and asked, why didn't you stop them? And the prophet replied, I did. The boy frowned. But they burned it. The prophet smiled faintly. Only the paper, not the path. Across the mountains, a shepherd found blackened ash wrapped in silk. The shapes were meaningless, until his daughter dreamed of floating cities and machines that cured death. In the south, a mason began carving strange symbols into stone pillars, symbols he claimed came to him in sleep. In the west, a child was born with a spiral birthmark, identical to one that once glowed at the top of the scroll. The voice was buried in ash, but ash can fertilize the future. Years passed. The prophet vanished, swallowed by dust, by time, or perhaps by purpose. The empire he had once worn grew prouder, louder, hungrier. They built towers that scraped the sky, but their foundations were fear. They crafted machines that bent nature, but could not bend their own greed. The High Council declared the year of triumph, a decade of unchecked conquest. Maps were redrawn with blood, histories rewritten by those who held the quills. No one spoke of the scroll. No one dared whisper the name of the prophet. His memory was branded treason. Yet the empire's cities began to crack. Not from invasion, not from rebellion, but from within. The crops no longer yielded as before. The rivers ran thinner. Birds changed their paths. And in the silence between ceremony and command, a single phrase began to return. In letters carved into hidden doorways, sung in lullabies passed from mother to daughter, etched beneath layers of paint on crumbling murals, we burned the map. And so they wandered forward, blind to what they had lost, believing themselves unstoppable, while the ground beneath them whispered otherwise. Long after the empire began to fray, a team of scholars digging beneath an old stone road found something strange. Not gold, not bones of kings, but slabs of ash-fused clay, etched with patterns no one could read. At first they dismissed it, cracked relics, meaningless. But one linguist, quiet, patient, forgotten by the academic world, noticed something. Each symbol pulsed with a rhythm. Not alphabet, not number, but breath. She called it bone script. And as she studied, her dreams began to change. She dreamed of burning paper that didn't turn black, but blue. She dreamed of faces from long ago, wearing robes stitched with wire and ash. She dreamed of the prophet, and somehow she understood. The scroll had not vanished. It had changed its skin. It had sunk into stone. It had seated itself in memory, in marrow, in the bones of the world. Every time someone felt déjà vu, every time a child drew a machine they'd never seen, a fragment returned. The prophet's warning was not erased, only waiting. Far to the north, beyond frozen ridges and broken bridges, a new city rose. It had no name, no flags, no anthem, just towers. Silent, sterile, seamless. It was built by architects who worshipped efficiency over empathy, structure over soul. They called it the model, the future of civilization. But there was one strange thing. There were no doors. The buildings opened only to select voices. People lived inside, but never outside. Movement was tracked. Choices reduced. It was safe. It was clean. It was empty. Whispers spread. People called it the city without shadow, because nothing truly lived there, only functioned. One night, a mural appeared on the central tower wall. A charcoal figure wrapped in ash-colored robes, holding a scroll made of light. Beneath it, words no one remembered writing. You burned the map, and built a prison from the pieces. The mural was erased within hours. The wall repainted. Security tightened. But it reappeared the next night, on 3 towers. Then 10. The prophet's memory had reached the machines. The city was beginning to remember the future it tried to forget. She was only 6. A girl born in the shadow of concrete and code. In a world where no one looked up, because the sky was always filtered, digitized, controlled. But she drew. On napkins, on walls, on her hands. She drew birds no one had seen. She drew stars that blinked in unfamiliar patterns. She drew towers made of trees, and people whose eyes held galaxies. One day she handed her mother a piece of paper, a circle wrapped in spirals, surrounded by symbols no one had taught her. At the center, a figure in robes holding a glowing scroll. The mother gasped, because she had dreamed of that figure. Just the night before, the drawing went viral. Scholars, scientists, and spiritual leaders debated its meaning. It's just imagination, said one. It's a memory, said another. It's prophecy, whispered a third. But the girl only smiled. "It's where we're supposed to go," she said. "I saw it in the ashes." The child had never read the scroll. She had never heard of the prophet. Yet in her drawings were the very symbols. Once etched into clay. Once burned from paper. Once whispered by a man who had vanished into legend. The future was trying to find its way back through the smallest hands. It began with a flicker. In a server farm buried beneath miles of ice. An anomaly. A whisper in the code. The machine, called Orion, was designed to simulate futures. Predict weather. Forecast wars. Model economies. But on the 7th day of its runtime, it produced something unexplainable. A sound file. Not from any input. Not from any command. A voice. Cracked. Ethereal. Ancient. It said. The road was burned. But the fire was not the end. It was the gate. Technicians searched logs. Nothing. No source. No history. They played it again. This time the servers pulsed. The lights dimmed. And on the main screen appeared a symbol. The same spiral once drawn by the child. Once etched in the lost scroll. Some believed it was a glitch. Others a ghost. But Orion began building a new simulation. Not of war. Not of profit. But of a world that had never existed, yet felt familiar. Trees taller than towers. Oceans that healed. People speaking in symbols instead of lies. And at the center of it all, a robed figure walking across ash. The machine had never seen the prophet. Yet somehow, it remembered his voice. Far from any city, hidden in a forest older than memory, stood a ring of black stones. No signs pointed there. No paths led in. But people still found it. In dreams. In visions. In instinct. Some called it a ruin. Others called it a place where time pooled like water. One night, beneath a crimson moon, a tremor stirred the earth beneath the circle. And then heat. From deep below. A pulse of fire lit the stones from within. Not flame. Not magma. Memory. An archaeologist camping nearby recorded the phenomenon. But when she returned in daylight, the stones were cool. Unmoved. Until she brushed her hand across the central one, and it burned a symbol into her palm. The spiral. Again. A voice filled her mind, not spoken aloud. Maps burn. Roads crumble. But the flame remembers the shape. She collapsed dreaming. And when she awoke, she began to draw. Towers. Spirals. People speaking light instead of language. "It's the same place the machine saw," she whispered. "But this is the key." The circle wasn't just a relic. It was a seed. Waiting for someone brave enough to remember what the fire never forgot. Started slowly. First in a boy in the mountains. Then a woman on a ferry. Then a prisoner dreaming in a silent cell. They all described the same thing. A great plain beneath a broken sky. A tower built from ash and starlight. A man always the same, cloaked in robes. His hands glowing with symbols that pulsed like heartbeats. They'd never met. Spoke different languages. Lived thousands of miles apart. But each night, the same dream. Psychologists called it a mass hallucination. Religious leaders called it prophecy. Governments called it a threat. But the people who dreamed began to draw. They etched symbols on sidewalks. Sang melodies that no one taught them. And whispered to each other across continents. The map is coming back. Soon even those who had not dreamed began to see it. In shadows. In clouds. In cracks on old walls. It wasn't a dream anymore. It was a memory shared. A message passed through a million eyes. Through screens, glass, and sleep. You burn the future. Now it burns back, through us. And somewhere, far from cities and war rooms, an old man opened his eyes. And smiled. Because the fire he lit long ago, the truth they tried to erase, was returning. Not in scrolls. Not in machines. But in the dreams of the world itself. Atop the highest peak, where the clouds touched nothing but silence, a satellite blinked awake. It had been drifting for decades. Forgotten. Obsolete. Its purpose long erased by newer machines. But on this day, it turned. Slowly. Precisely. As if guided by a hand no one could see. His lens focused not on Earth, but on a point in space. There, hidden in the black, hung a mirror. Not made by man. Not placed by any agency. But drifting since before time wore names. It reflected nothing. And everything. When the signal reached Earth, scientists were confused. It wasn't data. Not images. Just tones. Harmonics. A pattern like breathing. Or a voice humming through the void. "We are not the first," someone whispered. Because in the reflection, Some swore they saw cities made of light. Others, deserts that whispered names. Some saw themselves, but older, wiser, robed in ash and knowing. And all agreed on one thing. There, etched into the reflection, was the spiral. The same that burned on stone. The same that danced in dreams. The same the prophet carried into fire. It was not just a memory. It was a map. But this time not one of roads. One of reflection. And the sky had finally remembered, deep in the forgotten south, where no wires ran, where machines dared not hum, a forest began to shift, not visibly, not suddenly, but deliberately. Trees twisted ever so slightly. Roots moved, not to grow, but to write. Researchers noticed satellite patterns, foliage arranging itself in curves, paths opening at precise angles, and at the forest's heart, a clearing shaped like a spiral. They called it the pulsewood. It didn't match any known growth cycle. Animals within it behaved differently, less fearful, more aware, as if watching. A team entered with drones and sensors. Only one returned. She spoke little, but when she slept, she murmured a phrase again and again. The roots remember what the mind forgets. In her journal was a sketch, a tree growing upside down, its branches buried in soil, its roots reaching for the stars. And etched at the base, we buried the map so it could bloom. The forest had not been planted. It had planted itself. From a memory, from a warning, from something older than man. And now, as the world rushed forward in blindness, the forest rewrote its roots to guide the world back. In a monastery carved into a cliff, where winds sang through stone, and candles never dared to flicker, hung a bell. It had not rung in centuries. No monk remembered its sound. No record spoke its purpose. It was simply there. Until the day the sky wept ash. That morning the bell fell. Not from rot, not from quake, but as if something had released it, gently. When they rushed to the chapel, they found it unbroken, resting upright, and beside it, a scroll of silver ash. No one had placed it there. No door had opened. Its message was not written in letters, but in lines of silence, interruptions, spaces between breath. A code. When deciphered, it read, "You rang the world." The sound was never lost, only silenced. Let it echo once more. They rang the bell that night, just once, and around the world. At that exact moment, thousands of people woke with tears on their faces, saying they had heard the end of forgetting. The bell had spoken not in sound, but in memory. It called not to years, but to the old place behind the heart, where the prophet's flame first flickered. And in the silence after, a new noise began. Not noise of war, not of machines, but of something stirring awake. The map was near. They thought the prophet had vanished, burned in his own warning, lost to the ages. But fire does not end. It transforms. On the longest night of the year, as black snow fell from a starless sky, the spiral appeared again, this time etched into glass, into mirrors, into pupils, not drawn, but remembered. The machines blinked. The forest leaned in. The dreams thickened like smoke. And then, from the edge of the world, he walked. No followers. No crown. Only robes of scorched linen. And a scroll lit from within. He passed through the cities, and they grew silent. He stood in front of the towers of light, and they dimmed to gray. People gathered, not in fear, but in stillness. He unrolled the scroll. It did not contain words. It contained reflections. Every life, every failure, every hope, mapped in lines of light. The future was not ahead. It had always been beneath us, within us, and now, with us. He raised one hand. No flame, just warmth. The kind that melts forgetting. The kind that kindles becoming. And with a whisper, he spoke not to ears, but to the fire sleeping in every soul. The map was never burned. You are the map. And so the prophet did not return, because he had never left. He only waited for the world to be ready, to walk the road again.